But if I was going to talk about one holiday horror film, the only one that truly bears a discussion is Silent Night, Deadly Night.
Yeah, I was just going to bring that one up. I mean, it's amazing.
Last Christmas, Silent Night, Deadly Night, that's the one with Santa as the axe murderer.
Rob, when Silent Night, Deadly Night was first released, many parents were shocked that a movie about a maniacal Santa Claus would be shown at Christmas time.
And Silent Night, Deadly Night now has the distinction of joining I Spit on Your Grave as one of the two most contemptible films I've seen. It really is quite awful. You people have nothing to be proud of, even if you made a few bucks off of all the negative publicity. Your profits truly are blood money. And yes, we even see Santa give one little girl a bloody knife as a gift and threaten another little girl with physical punishment as she sits on his lap.
Silent Night, Deadly Night opens in 93 theaters tomorrow in North and South Carolina and in upstate New York, with plans for a wider release already in the works. When angry parents picketed theaters where it played, and the critics took offense.
The movie that shocked America, outraged Hollywood, and frightened the government. Silent Night, Deadly Night.
Yo, what's up? I'm Eldritch Terror, and welcome back to my channel where I like to talk about all things spooky, scary, and have a little bit of fun. Yes, the weather is getting colder and the horror movies are getting cozier, and last week I made a list of my top 10 favorite horror movies to watch during this Christmas season. Now, one movie franchise that I talked about is a little bit special out of the bunch, and that's going to be Silent Night, Deadly Night due to its controversial story that surrounds its whole franchise's aura. That's right, the movie that came out in 1984, just 4 years after Christmas Evil, received all kinds of panic in the theaters. People thought that this was a relentless attack on their holiday, and they were not going to stand for it. People protested and even rioted in the streets, getting this thing pulled from theaters just a couple weeks after its initial release. And you may ask yourself, why did Silent Night, Deadly Night get this treatment and not Christmas Evil? Well, you have to understand that the culture around Christmas in 1984 was very specific. There was a whole war on Christmas epidemic going around, and people were absolutely freaking out thinking that their holiday was being taken away from them. And Silent Night, Deadly Night came in at just the right time. I mean, this movie, though it wouldn't shock people in modern day times, it was a lot for its time of release. You gotta think, other horror movies that came out this year include Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th Part 4. So stacking up the themes in this one with ones like those, you can see that this was pretty gritty for its era. But even though this movie was pulled from theaters so early, it made a killing in the home digital market. Sick horror freaks would be stocking up on VHSs of Silent Night, Deadly Night for years to come, and it would be permanently implemented as a forever staple in this genre. So today we're going to dig into this whole Silent Night, Deadly Night franchise. We're going to do a full retrospective here today. So if you haven't seen these movies just yet, spoilers beware, I'm going to explain everything here. We're going to take you through all 5 of the numbered Silent Night, Deadly Night movies, and even talk a little bit about the loose remake that came out a few years ago. So jingle your bells and grab your eggnog, because we're going to go all the way back to 1984 where this all began. Silent Night, Deadly Night is a 1984 American slasher film directed by Charles E. Sellier, and our story kicks off in 1971 with 5-year-old Billy Chapman and his family visiting a nursing home in Utah. They're here to visit Billy's catatonic grandfather, though this whole catatonic thing may be an act, because as soon as the family leaves the room, the grandfather hilariously springs into action and grabs Billy, warning him to fear Santa Claus.
Christmas Eve is the scariest damn night of the year.
Meanwhile in town, a criminal dressed in a Santa suit robs a liquor store and guns down the shop owner, and in a stroke of bad luck, flees the store just in time to catch Billy's family on their way back home. The naughty Santa attempts to carjack the family, and as Billy's father tries to drive away, the criminal shoots him dead and attempts to sexually assault Billy's mother. She tries to fight back, but he slashes her throat with a switchblade and Billy flees and hides. 3 years pass in December 1974, and we meet back up with 8-year-old Billy and his 4-year-old younger brother Ricky, as they're celebrating Christmas in an orphanage run by Mother Superior. Now this Mother Superior is a rotten old bat who believes that punishment is a good thing, and relishes in any opportunity to inflict pain on the people in her orphanage. On Christmas Day, the orphanage invites a man in a Santa Claus suit to visit the children. Mother Superior sees this as an excellent opportunity to punish Billy and to try to force him out of his comfort zone. But as she tries to sit Billy on Santa's lap, Billy freaks out and straight decks this man in the face before fleeing to his room in horror. 10 years later, in the spring of 1984, Billy is now 18 years old, and that means he finally gets to leave the orphanage for a normal life. Trying to put his abusive past and childhood trauma behind him, Billy obtains a job as a stock boy at a local toy store. And here we are greeted by an amazing cinematic montage of Billy just adjusting to life, stocking the shelves, and being a good dude. I mean, we give Mother Superior a lot of flack, but it seems that her methods were working out here, doesn't it? I mean, look at this guy. I'm sure that there's nothing terrible brewing up inside of him. At the end of the montage, we realize that Billy has developed a crush on his coworker Pamela. Billy seems to like this girl so much that he started having some dreams about her, but his fantasies are often interrupted by morbid visions of his parents' murders. On Christmas Eve, the employee who normally plays the store's Santa Claus is injured, and Billy's boss, Mr. Sims, makes him take his place. Kind of creating a Batman-type situation here, where we're putting Billy in the costume of that he fears most. And also, just like Batman, Santa Man here relishes in instilling fear into the hearts of future criminals. If, you know, by criminals we're talking about small children here.
I don't bring toys to naughty children. I punish them severely.
After the store closes, the staff has a Christmas Eve party, where Billy, still in the Santa Claus suit, tries to have a good time, but keeps having memories of his parents' murders, causing him to feel depressed.
Thinking about my parents.
Oh, good. That's fine. That's fine.
They're dead.
Oh.
Billy notices some of his coworkers heading into the back room, and as he follows after them, he sees one of them trying to assault another. This triggers Billy's insanity, causing an explosion of horrible Christmas cheer to go off inside of his head. And as his Santa Man instincts seem to take over, he decides to hang the assailant with a string of Christmas lights. And as he does this, he seems to have some kind of moment of clarity where he decides that punishment is good, Mother Superior was right, and decides to murder Pamela with a box cutter. Continuing his rampage through the toy store, Billy murders Mr. Sims with a hammer and shoots Miss Randall with a bow and arrow. The toy store is such an intense setting for something like this to go down in. There's something truly ominous about all of these children's toys sitting around, eyes wide, as they watch these people be murdered by Santa Claus in front of them. Fleeing the store, Billy breaks into a nearby house where a young couple are shacking up, while a little girl named Cindy is sleeping in the next room. Billy impales the woman on a set of deer antlers, in a practical kill that is truly iconic, and tosses the man through a window. When this awakens the girl in the next room, Billy asks her if she's been naughty or nice. When she says she's been nice, Billy decides to give her a little Christmas present, and hands her a nice little bloodied box cutter. After this, Billy takes a little hike and witnesses two bullies picking on teenage boys and stealing their sleds. Regarding this as a truly naughty action that deserved proper punishment, he hides and waits for another iconic kill as he decapitates this one coming down on the sled. The next morning, Captain Richards and Sister Margaret deduce that Billy will be coming to the orphanage, where his younger brother Ricky is still living, looking for Mother Superior. Officer Barnes responds to orders to secure the orphanage, and when he arrives, sees a man in a Santa suit approaching some children. He fires some bullets off and murders the Santa imposter right in front of these little kids, scarring them for life, only to find out that it wasn't Billy. This was actually Father O'Brien, who was dressed in the Santa outfit that day for the orphanage. As Barnes continues patrolling the area, he is found by Billy and struck in the chest with an axe. Billy finally then makes his way into the orphanage to confront Mother Superior, who is now bound to a wheelchair. Just as he is prepared to kill her, Richards shoots him in the back. Billy drops to the floor and tells the children in his dying breath, "You're safe now. Santa Claus is gone," before dying from his injuries. His now 14-year-old younger brother Ricky looks down at his dying body and then up at Mother Superior scowling and utters, "Naughty," indicating that one day he will seek some sort of revenge on her for his brother's death. And so Silent Night, Deadly Night would become the movie that would instill fear into the public and spawn a franchise of many more films soon to come. This movie is gritty, it is edgy, it pushes boundaries that people would not have thought to push back in 1984. And for all of its low-budget, schlocky goodness, they really hammered in where they needed to and made sure that a lot of these effects looked really cool. The original Silent Night, Deadly Night is a movie that has found a place in the heart of horror fans all over the world. And it seems to be the one that takes itself the most seriously out of the bunch. As we move on through these next few, they will progressively start to get more and more self-indulgent, I guess you could say. But that's not to say that they're a bad time. Now, this next one, Silent Night, Deadly Night 2, is one that a lot of people actually say is their favorites. When people think of the Silent Night, Deadly Night franchise, this second one is the first one that comes to mind, 90% of the time. Which is kind of a shame, because this first one, in my opinion, is really good. But as it spends almost a quarter of its runtime dedicated to retelling the events of the first movie, I guess you could see why it makes that first one kind of obsolete. This movie doesn't go the Evil Dead route and like remake the original movie within the movie. No, they decided to re-edit it back into it. But if you loved the schlockiness, if you loved the line delivery, if you loved how goofy that first movie was, then you're gonna want to strap yourself in, because this one's right up your alley as well. Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2 is the 1987 American slasher film directed by Lee Harry. This movie was given a significantly lower budget than the first film after the whole Christmas Panic fiasco. However, surprisingly, this film was released in theaters again, though just like its predecessor, it was quickly pulled. Now, this film spends the first 40 minutes of its runtime re-showing the entirety of the first film, re-edited and contextualized from the perspective of Ricky, Billy's little brother. And to catch you up to speed, Ricky's messed up too. The whole plot device for this movie is that Ricky is explaining to this reporter, Dr. Bloom, about all the horrible things that have happened to him and the things that he's done. For a short time after Billy's death, Ricky was adopted by a Jewish family and was able to be given a good upbringing, but his trauma around Christmas was never truly addressed. After his adopted father's passing, Ricky seems to slowly lose his composure as he commits a series of murders targeted against people whom he presumes to be naughty. Ricky's slow loss of sanity is shown to us as he first witnesses somebody being assaulted at a park and defends them by attacking the assailant, running them over repeatedly with their car. The would-be victim here even thanks Ricky, seemingly affirming his messed up belief system. Later in life, as he has a job as a dishwasher, he goes out back to take out the trash and has a run-in with another criminal. This one he apprehends by jamming an umbrella through his torso, in another amazing kill for the franchise. I mean, just look at the way that he opens the umbrella up and it falls over, just kind of limply laying over top of him as it starts to rain. The art here is beautiful, but another chance at a normal life presents itself to Ricky when a fate encounter introduces him to his would-be girlfriend, Jennifer. The film haphazardly shows us how Ricky and Jennifer seem to fall in love here. We even get to visit them on a little date to the movies. Here there's a jerk behind him that won't seem to shut up, and Ricky just has to go and do something about that. But while he's cartoonishly taking care of the nuisance, Jennifer's ex-boyfriend Chip appears and introduces himself into the fray. Shortly after, Ricky and Jennifer are out for a walk and have another unexpected encounter with Chip. This dude Chip is straight up the worst. He begins degrading and talking all kind of crazy about Jennifer straight to Ricky's face. And this would be enough for Ricky to just take the gloves off and take care of Chip right there in front of Jennifer. Bro overpowers him and then electrocutes him with jumper cables attached to the car, jamming one of them inside of his mouth and causing his eyes to explode out of his sunglasses. This is amazing. This is just brutal. Jennifer's watching on in horror, and as she makes the appropriate reaction and freaking out and yelling at Ricky for just murdering a man in front of her, something about being scalded causes something to tick inside of his brain, and Ricky just snaps, completely giving in to the delusions that his brother had before him. Mother Superior really messed these brothers up, and when in doubt, it's time to take the naughty out. So Ricky strangles Jennifer to death with a car antenna, and a nearby police officer witnesses this. He rushes over to arrest Ricky, but is quickly overpowered and Ricky's able to take him down. Now brandishing a firearm, it's time for Ricky to really set things off here. He goes on a little spree and walks around the neighborhood, taking 3 more people out. And this is where we get the iconic line.
Garbage Day! Huh? No!
This film has some of the best line delivery in the entire franchise. Eventually, Ricky finds himself in a standoff with the police and tries but fails to take himself out before being arrested. Upon finishing his recollection to Dr. Bloom, Ricky strangles him to death using an audio tape and escapes from the mental hospital. He then murders a Salvation Army Santa just to steal his costume, and Ricky sets out on a plan to kill Mother Superior, the nun who brutally abused him and his brother as a child, and whom his brother failed to murder just 4 years earlier. Arriving at the scene, we meet a now decrepit Mother Superior as she is chased by Ricky throughout her house. When Ricky finally catches her, we get another one of the best lines in this movie.
Naughty this!
and Ricky decapitates her with an axe before cleaning up the blood and staging a little scene. As soon as police arrive and discover the body, a screaming Ricky leaps out and prepares to attack, but is shot down out of the patio door. Laying on the ground below, Ricky suddenly opens his eyes and smiles devilishly, indicating that he has survived his gunshot wounds, and that we may get one final movie out of this guy. And that's Silent Night, Deadly Night 2, a big contender in what a lot of people think is their favorite in this franchise. And I can definitely see why. I mean, this movie is ridiculously goofy. While the first one has more of a serious approach to things, and I could see how people would be scared and threatened by it, this one is just ridiculous, and personally serves as much more of a black comedy than anything else. And though it did take quite a while for Ricky to get into the Santa suit in this movie, at least he wears it. That's right, we're kind of over the killer Santa trope, and we're gonna get into some different ones here. But don't worry, we're still keeping it Christmas and we're still keeping it horror. And in fact, in this third one, we're even keeping it with the Caldwell brothers still. So let's jump into it and see how their trilogy ends within the Silent Night franchise. Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 3 Better Watch Out is a 1989 American slasher film written and directed by Monty Hellman, making this the third straight Silent Night, Deadly Night film in a row to be directed by a different person. And this time around, we even have Bill Moseley portraying Ricky Caldwell. Now I'm gonna be straight up and honest with you guys. This movie lacks all of the charm and hilarity that the last two did, and it definitely lacks the tone and violence that came with the first film. But here we pick up with Ricky Caldwell 6 years after the last film, in a comatose state, with an insane transparent dome affixed to his head by the doctor's order to repair his damaged skull. Wanting to contact Ricky, the eccentric Dr. Newberry begins using a blind clairvoyant girl named Laura Anderson to try and reach out to him. One Christmas Eve, after a particularly traumatic session with Newberry, Laura begins to regret her participation in his experiment. After the session, Laura is picked up by her older brother Chris, and of course, a drunk hospital employee dressed as Santa Claus wanders his way into Ricky's room and begins to taunt him. This mystically rouses Ricky back to consciousness, and he murders the impersonator before making his way out and also killing a receptionist, then fleeing the hospital. Elsewhere, Laura is introduced by her brother to his new girlfriend, a flight attendant named Jerry, whom off-rip Laura shows some insane disdain for.
Chris tells me you're psychic. Chris tells me you give great head.
As the trio heads off to Laura's grandmother's, they overlook Ricky, who can hear Laura thanks to their mental link following them. Ricky decides to take the hitchhiker route, and after being picked up by the most insane motorist in the world, I mean, like, for real, who would pick this guy up? He, of course, murders him and jacks his truck. One way or another, Ricky makes it to the destination first, and Laura's grandmother, believing Ricky is simply an unfortunate vagrant, tries befriending him, but when she makes the mistake of offering him a Christmas gift, Ricky quickly snaps and murders her. Lieutenant Conley and Dr. Newberry find the two staff members that Ricky had butchered back at the hospital. They begin trying to track Ricky down, realizing he is drawn towards Laura after their surveillance camera footage shows him uttering her name. Reaching Granny's house, Laura feels that something is wrong, but Chris ignores her suspicions and explains it away as their grandmother must have just gone for a walk. But when Granny fails to show up and the car is found to be sabotaged, the group very quickly become worried, with Chris and Jerry deciding to go out and look for her. Laura, being a psychic or whatever, senses that Ricky is staring at her through the window and screams. This brings Chris and Jerry back into the house, but after discovering the phone line is dead and her picture is missing, Laura realizes it must be Ricky who is after her, just moments before Ricky punches his way through the door and begins throttling Jerry. But she is saved when Chris stabs him in the arm. Elsewhere, Conley and Newberry have a little bit of a discrepancy over whether or not Ricky needed to be murdered or taken back for further studying. Conley is a firm believer that evil must die tonight, while Newberry is a little bit more on the Sartain side of things. When Conley leaves the car to urinate, Newberry then steals the car and drives off, intending to try to reason with or trap Ricky, but not wanting his experiment to go to waste. Armed with the old greener,
It's Granddad's old greener.
Chris, Laura, and Jerry go out searching for aid, but are ambushed by Ricky, who stabs Chris in the chest. While Laura and Jerry run back to the house, Newberry finds Ricky. At first, Ricky is uninterested in Newberry, but is drawn closer when Newberry plays a tape of one of his and Laura's sessions. As Ricky reaches out to him, Newberry, believing the tape had some kind of calming effect, grabs out for Ricky's hand, only then to be stabbed in the stomach. Laura and Jerry barricade the doors to the house, but Ricky cartoonishly manages to break in through this window. While looking for a gun, Ricky kills Jerry, and her body is found seconds later by Laura. Ricky approaches, allowing Laura to touch his face for a moment, and then becomes enraged when Laura flees in terror after feeling his artificial skull cap. I mean, dude, come on, what were you trying to do here? Ricky chases after her into the basement, where Laura is encouraged by a vision of her grandmother, whose body she finds hanging from the ceiling before knocking the light out, to reach out and use her powers. Ricky makes his way in and gets his upper hand on Laura when Chris appears and shoots him with a shotgun. Unfortunately though, old Grandpa's greener seems to be firing blanks, and the unharmed Ricky snatches it from Chris and uses it to choke him into unconsciousness. Ricky then moves in to finish off Laura, but as she grabs a piece of broken stick or something and holds it out in front of her, Ricky just kind of leaps on top of it, impaling himself anticlimactically. Reaching the house with backup, Conley finds the dying Newberry before discovering Laura cradling her brother's body in the house. Driven away by Conley as the body of a survivor is rushed to the hospital by paramedics, Laura wishes the lieutenant a Merry Christmas before we get our final shot of Ricky breaking the fourth wall to wish us a Happy New Year? Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 3 finds a way to give us way more star power than the last two did, while also giving us half of the movie that the other ones did. I mean, this movie is filled to the brim with just awkward silences and weird improvised line delivery. Like, I really don't understand what was going on here. It feels like maybe this was supposed to be like an episode for like an anthology series or something like that, but then they just decided to make it a Silent Night, Deadly Night movie and stretch it out as far as it needed to be a feature film. Yes, surprisingly, this was the first of the Silent Night, Deadly Night movies to not make it into theaters and just go straight to home video, completely bypassing all of the Christmas panic stuff that we've dealt with before. But these next two Silent Night, Deadly Night movies have nothing to do with the Caldwell brothers. Instead, we're getting a fresh slate to experiment with some new ideas and bring some new flavor to the franchise. In the next two films, we will be visiting a cult and an evil toy maker, before finally making our way back to the Silent Night loose remake of the first movie. Silent Night, Deadly Night 4 Initiation is a 1990 American supernatural horror film, directed by yet another newcomer, Brian Yuzna. This fourth installment of the Silent Night, Deadly Night series has no resemblance to the previous films, as it drops the storyline of Billy and Ricky Caldwell completely. And yes, that means that we won't be seeing Bill Moseley returning, but we do get Screaming Mad George as practical effects here. And if you don't know anything about this guy, we're gonna find out right now. Our story here follows Kim Levitt as an aspiring journalist working for the Los Angeles Eye newspaper. Her boss, Eli, seems to give all the men in her office the breaks, including her boyfriend Hank. But when a woman is discovered dead on the sidewalk, half burned into ashes in an apparent case of spontaneous combustion, Kim decides to pursue the story on her own without Eli's approval. While investigating, she crosses paths with a woman named Fema, a used bookstore proprietor whose shop is the building that the woman jumped from. As a gift, Fema offers Kim a book on feminism and the occult. Later, Kim has dinner with Hank at his family's house, where Hank's father makes snide remarks about Kim, and his family shows general disdain. Later at her apartment, Kim begins reading the book that Fema gave her, and stumbles upon a chapter on the fire of Lilith, depicting a woman engulfed in flames. The next day, Kim arrives to a picnic to meet Fema, where she's introduced to Catherine Harrison, a self-described old crone, and the young Jane Yanana. They tell her about Lilith, Adam's first wife, and the spirit of all that crawls. Kim visits the rooftop where the woman jumped from after she burned, and here she meets a vagrant named Ricky. Ricky shoves his arm into this disgusting pipe here, and as bugs swell out, he pulls this insane maggot creature from the hole. Here's where we start to get a glimpse at what they used Screamin' Mad George for. This thing is disgusting, and it's so disgusting that it sends Kim running away in terror. Back at the office, Eli, instead of being angry about Kim missing work, decides to let her officially have the spontaneous combustion story. Granted this opportunity, Kim decides to visit Fema's apartment and ask her some more questions. But Fema serves her a cup of tea and it starts to make her a little nauseous. And here she tells Kim of her daughter Lilith, who is the woman who jumped from the building at the beginning of the film, before offering her a date and demanding Kim to eat it. She accepts it, though for a brief moment it takes the appearance of a roach in her hand. And soon after, Kim loses consciousness. She wakes up surrounded by Jane, Fema, Catherine, and Lee, where they perform a ritual on her. Ricky and Fema slice open a liver rat and insert a giant larva into Kim's stomach. When it emerges from her mouth as a full-grown, giant, multi-segmented roach, she vomits the creature out, and Ricky quickly slices the creature in half and drips its innards into Kim's face. Kim wakes up later, fully dressed, still in Fema's apartment. She rushes home, terrified, and finds Hank, who is unable to calm her as she wiles out and even thinks about taking some pills. Something swings though, because she starts to get all worked up and climbs on top of Hank, just long enough to distract him as Ricky seems to enter the apartment and sit down on the bed, making himself comfy. He flips on Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 3, and that atrocious mess of a movie is enough to finally get Hank's attention. They wrestle for a bit, and then Ricky stabs Hank to death. During the commotion, Kim manages to answer a ringing phone and screams for her coworker Janice to come help her. Ricky captures Kim and binds her before Janice arrives. But when she does, instead of helping Kim, she admonishes Ricky for the mess and tells him to take Kim straight to Fema. Ricky locks Kim in a meat locker next to Fema's bookstore where she loses consciousness again. When she awakens, she is surrounded by the entire cult, and they watch on as Ricky seems to impregnate her. Regaining consciousness in the meat locker, her fingers have binded themselves together in a knot, and she experiences incredible pain as her legs bind together in an insect-like tail before she loses consciousness. When she finally comes back to in the meat locker again, a man opens the door, frees her legs from a brittle cocoon-like substance, and covers her the best that he can. He explains to her that she has now been initiated and should leave. Freaked out and confused about the whole experience, Kim decides to go visit Fema at the bookstore the next day. Here it is explained to her that Fema wants her to kidnap Hank's little brother in order to sacrifice him for some kind of witchy ritual. Kim brings policeman Detective Burt to her apartment. There, everything is spotless and there's no trace of Hank's body, leading Kim to question her sanity entirely. At the newspaper Christmas party, Kim confronts Eli about Hank's whereabouts, and he claims that Hank is away on an assignment. Janice is also there and welcomes her to the family. Furious and confused, Kim storms out of the office. On the sidewalk, she notices Ricky following her and ducks into a motel room. Inside, her feet begin to get painfully hot, so she jumps into the shower trying to cool herself off. But this has adverse effects and she bursts into tiny flames. Ricky enters the room and, in pain, Kim agrees to help kidnap Hank's teenage brother Lonnie to complete the initiation. On Christmas Eve, Kim lures Lonnie out of his house, and Ricky murders Hank's parents by strangling them with Christmas lights and then setting the house ablaze. Back on the rooftop where Lilith originally jumped from at the beginning of our story, Kim is asked by her newfound coven to stab Lonnie, but instead, she revolts and stabs Fema. In anger, Fema pulls the knife from her stomach and threatens Kim. But Ricky, now having some kind of strange change of heart, decides to block the stabbing and gets stabbed himself. As he falls to the ground, giant larvae feed on Ricky and Kim's legs begin to get hot again. She somehow manages to twist her hands back into knots as they burst into flames. She then stabs her flaming twisted knife hands into Fema's wound, and this transfers the curse of Lilith onto Fema, causing her to erupt into flames and dive off of the rooftop, just as her daughter had. Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 3 takes a huge departure from the rest of the franchise, and we'll see that trend continued with the next one as well. But man, after the nothing burgers that 2 and 3 were, I really can just take this and run with it. This movie is insane. There's some crazy special effects, and the route that this decided to go in was just totally bonkers. Who would have thought that witches and Christmas would ever be mended together into a horror movie? The social commentary that comes with this one is a little bit heavy, but very ambiguous at the same time, as it explores the extremes on both sides of the spectrum when it comes to gender equality. But now that we've seen what happens when the Silent Night, Deadly Night vibes get a little bit more serious, let's see what happens when they make it about toys instead of killer Santa Claus or witches. Silent Night, Deadly Night 5, The Toy Maker, is a 1991 American science fiction horror film directed by yet another newcomer, Martin Kitrosser. And this film hilariously stars a man named Mickey Rooney, who had previously condemned the original film back when all the Christmas panic stuff was going on. Now, this movie does serve to be a sequel to the last one in some respects, as it features some returning characters, but will focus on a new family. Late one night in December, a young young boy named Derek Quinn finds a Christmas present addressed to him on the porch, but his suspicious father opens the gift instead and finds a strange musical orb inside that's shaped like Santa Claus. He activates it, and it causes it to get all crazy and start strangling him. As Tom struggles to get Santa's ball out of his mouth, he slips and falls impaled onto a fire poker. 2 weeks later, the boy and his mother, Sarah, go to visit a toy store owned by an elderly man named Geppetto, and they're stalked at a distance by a man named Noah Adams. Geppetto's son, Pino, offers Derek a crazy little snake toy, but Derek rejects the gift and begs his mother to leave, prompting Joe to angrily yell at Pino, blaming him for the store's recent failures. While running from his father, Pino bumps into Noah, who buys some toys before leaving. At his home, Noah begins taking apart the toys when he's confronted by his landlord, Harold. Late on paying rent, Noah decides to give Harold the same toy that Pino was trying to give Derek earlier, in exchange for a one-day extension on the rent. But while driving home, Harold is then killed by the crazy little toy when it crawls into his mouth and sucks his eyes out. The next day, Sarah tries to cheer Derek up by taking him to the mall to meet Santa. But something seems to be up with this particular mall Santa, and Derek once again begs his mother to leave. Meanwhile, Pino sneaks into their home, but when Sarah and Derek arrive home early, they catch Pino in the act and he flees. Disturbed by this, Sarah goes to the store and confronts Joe about Pino's intrusions, and later decides to let Derek open the present that was dropped off earlier on the porch. But Derek, doesn't want nothing to do with these random presents and weird stuff that's been going on. This is where things start to get a little bit weird, and Sarah is visited by her friend Kim. Yeah, the same Kim from the last movie, with the witches Kim. And she's even brought her newly adopted son, Lonnie, the surviving boy from that film. Derek sneaks outside and throws the present in the garbage, while his mother speaks to her friend. At the same time, a curious Ronnie decides to open up the gift and find some roller skates inside of it. But while using them, little hidden rockets inside of the skates launch out and make him lose control, causing him to get hit by a car and left hospitalized. Back at the toy store, in a drunken rage, Geppetto begins beating down Pino, seemingly and accidentally killing him by knocking him down some stairs. After spending a large section of this film's runtime doing some light stalking, Noah decides to confront Sarah in a parking garage, where he is revealed to be Sarah's ex-boyfriend and Derek's real father. The two reconcile. While at Sarah's house, Derek's babysitter Meredith and her boyfriend Buck start getting to business when a mysterious horde of toys emerges and begins to attack them. Meredith is shot by a tank toy right through the chest, and it is nasty looking, while Buck is overwhelmed by the rest of the horde. Sarah and Noah arrive just in time to find a bloodied Meredith, who tells them that Buck is dead and that Geppetto has abducted Derek, taking him to the toy store. Noah tells Sarah about Geppetto's past, saying he was arrested years earlier for booby-trapping toys he gave to children after his pregnant wife had died in a car crash. Sarah and Noah rush to the toy store. Geppetto attacks Noah with a remote-control plane and an acid-squirting water pistol, subsequently knocking him out. Hearing the noise, Sarah goes downstairs and finds the body of the real Geppetto. Understandably confused, Sarah turns around, finding what appears to be Geppetto behind her dressed in a Santa suit. A squabble occurs, and as she's able to demask Joe, it reveals robotic components underneath his face. It is explained that this is Pino, and he tells Sarah that Geppetto created him to replace his dead son, but he could never live up to his father's expectations, and was continually broken and rebuilt by Geppetto in his drunken rages. Pino said that he wants Sarah to be his mother, and that is why he sent the killer toys to try and kill Derek. He then reveals that he has a very skewed idea of what family is supposed to be here and begins trying to assault Sarah. She manages to break free and stab Pino in the head with a screwdriver, causing him to malfunction. Grabbing a knife that Sarah dropped earlier, Pino tries to find and kill Derek before Sarah can save him. Pino finds Derek, but somehow the little kid gets the upper hand on him, and as the struggle ensues, Noah breaks into the room and starts fighting Pino, distracting him long enough for Sarah to chop him in half with an axe. Barely functioning, Pino cries out for Sarah, grabbing her leg, but she breaks free and stomps his head into pieces. As Sarah, Derek, and Noah exit the building, the eyes of one of Joe's partially assembled robots sparks ominously. Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 5 ditches our themes of witches for one a little bit more close to home when it comes to Christmas season. The killer toys was a nice idea and a nice touch to bring into this franchise. It's hard to say where the series was going to go after getting so experimental with that last one, but I'm really glad that they decided to bring it back in for this and make it a little bit more about the seasonal. As our last titled entry into the series, they decided to put a pin in it for a little while after this one, not really knowing where to go from here. I mean, the franchise had bounced around from so many different rights holders over the years, and every single one of these things was written and directed by a different person. It was so hard to keep anything nailed down. And I mean, let's be honest, Silent Night, Deadly Night was not bringing in the money that Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, and Halloween just were. It just wasn't happening. So Silent Night, Deadly Night would remain a cult classic, and it would be put into a box, set under the Christmas tree, and left there for the next horror fan to open year after year around this time. Until the 2000s rolled around, and someone got the bright idea to repackage this thing and try to throw it back out there for all the money that they could get. Someone thought, what if we took the Killer Santa thing and then we stripped all of the charm away and then we just threw all the money that we could at it and we just made a really good looking Killer Santa movie and we called it Silent Night, right? Wouldn't that be sick? Silent Night is a 2012 slasher film directed by Stephen C. Miller, and this time we're dropping the Deadly Night moniker altogether. This movie is a loose remake built off of some of the original ideas from the other movies, but Silent Night comes packing heat that the other ones absolutely did not have, coming in with a budget that's nearly 5 times as much as the next greatest in line. This movie had stars, CG, practical effects, and the 9 at its disposal. But it really does sacrifice the charm of the other movies for a more Rob Zombie-centric kind of vibe going on here. A mysterious man dressed in a Santa suit, complete with a mask, captures and kills a deputy sheriff in the small town of Cryer, Wisconsin. The deputy was being very naughty and sleeping with a married woman, so the Santa imposter decides to electrocute him with Christmas lights in his home. The following day, Christmas Eve, Cryer's Sheriff Cooper calls Deputy Aubrey Bradamore in on her day off when Jordan doesn't arrive to work. Aubrey is a new addition to the sheriff's office and is still reeling from the unexpected death of her husband John. She doesn't really think she's a good deputy, but she's trying to live up to her father's name as he is a retired and well-respected sheriff before her. Aubrey was going to spend the holiday with her parents, but instead goes to check out on the missing deputy, finding the mangled bodies of him and the woman he had been sleeping with. However, Sheriff Cooper decides not to tell Mayor Revy until the case is solved. Meanwhile, the masked Santa killer goes on a murder spree, killing those who have done something he considers naughty. Where have we heard that before? His next victim, however, is a bratty little teenage girl who he electrocutes to death with a cattle prod. He then makes his way to a local motel, murdering 2 of 3 people doing a softcore shoot. One of the women manages to escape and tries to hide inside of a Christmas tree farm, but the killer Santa chops off one of her legs and throws her feet first into a wood chipper. Sheriff Cooper calls in Deputy Stanley Giles and goes out to find the killer himself, but comes back empty-handed. Meanwhile, Aubrey starts to build her suspect list, slotting Jim Epstein, a local drunken Santa portrayer, drug dealer Stein Carson, and the perverted Reverend Medley. And nearby at a local bar, we find the first of our suspects. Here, Aubrey learns from Carson that Ronald Sr. had crashed his ex-wife's Christmas party many years ago, burning her alive with a homemade flamethrower after he thought she was being unfaithful. Aubrey's father was the deputy that responded to the situation and unfortunately had to gun him down, only to later find out that Ronald Jr. was in his father's truck watching the whole time. Aubrey attempts to interrogate Carson, but he flees. She gives chase, but is nearly killed before she is narrowly saved by Sheriff Cooper. That evening, during the town's annual Christmas parade, Aubrey searches for the killer, but is unable to identify him among the crowd of men dressed in Santa suits, though she does manage to find and arrest Jim when he flees from her. The killer Santa continues on his spree, arriving at the church and kills Reverend Medley for stealing donation money. And after returning the money to a churchgoer whom he deems nice, he makes his way to the mayor's house and murders him by strangling him with Christmas lights. Upstairs, the mayor's bratty daughter Tiffany and her boyfriend Dennis are getting busy. But as we all know, Santa finds this to be very naughty and decides to deal with the 2 of them. Tiffany gets a kill that's very reminiscent of the antler death that we saw earlier, this time done up with a little bit more budget to it. And Dennis, well, let's just say Santa left him with a splitting headache. Aubrey goes to Carson's motel room to arrest him, but is forced to kill him when he draws his gun on her. With 2 of the 3 suspects now dead, and 1 locked up in prison, you'd think that this would be the end of our story. But Aubrey notices a little gift box that contains a piece of coal, and recalls that both the station and her father had received that same gift earlier in the day. Aubrey books it to her parents' home, only to find her father dead and her mother hiding in the closet. Meanwhile, the killer attacks attacks back at the station, killing Giles with an axe, rampaging onto Cooper with a flamethrower, beating Jim's head in with some ho-ho-ho brass knuckles. Aubrey, along with the station's secretary Brenda, are then cornered by the killer inside of the police station, where the killer tries to burn down the building with a homemade flamethrower. Aubrey is able to overpower the Santa, however, and sets him on fire, leaving the station with Brenda. Unbeknownst to them, however, the killer manages to escape. It is later revealed that the killer Santa is Ronald Jones Jr., owner of a local chimney cleaning and repair service, and that he had survived the flamethrower attack. The tragedy caused Ronald Jr. to go insane and seek revenge, dressing as a Santa, so he would not get caught during the Cryer's Christmas festivals. The film ends with Ronald Jr. leaving Cryer in his truck. Though the Silent Night remake didn't exactly have the charm that the other ones had, it definitely packed the budget and the punch to kick things up a notch or two. For anybody that really wanted to get into this franchise but couldn't get down with the low budget schlockiness that the original ones have, this is the one for you. It takes a lot of ideas and imagery that we've already seen before and updates it and modernizes it. And though it's definitely for a different kind of audience, I think it nails that audience that it was trying to go for. I think people really are gonna like this movie if you were looking for that kind of thing. But that just about does it for the Silent Night franchise. What did you guys think of these movies? I know that general audiences for the most part are gonna find these to be pretty corny, but for a lot of us horror nerds, it's wiggled its way into a great spot in our hearts. I personally love to go back through these movies around this time of year. It's a great revisit, and it's amazing to see how franchises like this have stood the test of time due to the home market and just the patronage of horror fans. The Silent Night franchise has been through a lot of ups and downs, but what did you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below. What was your favorite Silent Night movie? And if the Silent Night movies aren't your favorite ones with killer Santas, I mean, which ones are? If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out the video I made last week talking about my favorite Christmas horror movies. Or if you like my franchise explanation, you can go even a little bit further back and see that I've done the entire Halloween franchise. These videos take a lot of work to make, and if you enjoyed it, be sure to send it to a friend you think might enjoy it too. And of course, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more videos just like this one. I've been Eldritch Terror, and whether your day's been going good or bad today, I hope it gets better. Happy holidays.